My fellow prophecy student, greetings. The overall predictions of events leading up to the end of the world seems to be better understood from the perspective of the book of Daniel than from the book of Revelation. Apart from the fact that the coordination of parallel prophecies provides a tool for easy analysis, the contemporary stories surrounding the life of Daniel are so full of lessons that can help us in our quest for a better understanding of end-time Bible prophecy. The predictions in the books of Daniel and Revelation seem to be dominated by the grisly accounts of the activities of this last-day enemy of Christ called the Antichrist. This little story in Daniel 6 seems to be the perfect example of what the Antichrist will do to demonstrate that he holds upon this earth the place of God Almighty. It was during the reign of Medo-Persia, when Darius was on the throne, that a proclamation was made that no one should pray to any other god beside King Darius the Mede. This proclamation had not only made Darius into a god, but it was done in direct defiance of the laws of God. There are two important issues in this story that we need to take a closer look at. When we look at the narrative development, you cannot fail to see that they are the perfect microcosm of what will be fulfilled on a wider scale during the end-time reign of the man of sin. Here are the two issues. 1. A conspiracy against the commandments of God, and 2. A disposition to exalt mortal man above the God of heaven. Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like the common features you read about in the end-time predictions of Daniel and Revelation? Let us take a more detailed look at the story. First, we will examine the conspiracy against the 10 Commandments. If you are familiar with Daniel chapter 6, you will recognize that the context in which the king's decree was issued is about the jealousy of the princes and presidents on account of the king's promotion of Daniel above them. Because of their envy, they conspired to get rid of him. As they could not see anything in his character to find fault with, they resorted to a most devious plot, saying thus among themselves, "We shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God." Daniel 6 and verse 5. Did you hear that? Because the conspirators against the prophet Daniel cannot find a fault in his behavior, they resolve to pass a decree that so conflicts with the laws of God that anyone who expresses their allegiance according to those laws will be accounted as guilty of an offense. This is where the conspiracy against the 10 Commandments was hatched. These men were well aware of the claims of God's holy commandments. Therefore they reasoned among themselves that because Daniel is a man of God, he would not violate his commandments and put himself out of favor with God. They knew that the only way to get at Daniel is to criminalize his allegiance to God. This decree was clearly a setup to have him thrown into the lion's den. The evil intention towards commandments of God, as chronicled in Daniel 6, is strikingly similar to what we see in chapter 11. When you look at the raft of predictions of events leading up to the end of the world in Daniel 11, you will see where it is stated that the king of the north, the Antichrist, shall have indignation against the Holy Covenant and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. Daniel 11 and verse 30. As Daniel 11 and verse 30 says, he will have the full support of those who will likewise disregard that which was written in stone with the finger of God as a binding document. According to Deuteronomy 5, 1-21 and Hebrews 9 and verse 4, the Holy Covenant is exclusively in reference to the 10 Commandments, the very Decalogue that Moses was instructed by God to put inside the Ark of the Testimony. The conspiracy against the Decalogue will be a major plank in the Antichrist's last day agenda. He will tamper with the 10 Commandments in order to legitimize a new religious culture. The next issue is the exaltation above the God of heaven. The story continues with the king signing the decree, and true to his sinful desire for self-exaltation, he was naturally pleased to be made into a god, being exalted above the Almighty. And so, he was delighted to have it established and institutionalized by irrevocable legislation. Here is what the decree says. Whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Daniel 6 and verse 7. This piece of legislation has its obvious implications. What this would mean is that for 30 days, no prayer gathering will be allowed, no Sabbath keeping will be allowed, and no individual prayers will be allowed, since those practices involve the rendering of homage contrary to the terms of the decree. It is interesting that in their resolve to show legislative disregard for the law of Daniel's God, his enemies chose to strike at the very first commandment of the Decalogue, which says, Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Exodus 20 and verse 3. Being the devoted person that Daniel was to his God, it would be unthinkable for Daniel to obey a decree that makes it illegal to render him homage. They knew that Daniel would be forced to disobey that law, and so, as Daniel was seen worshipping his God as per usual, he was arrested and thrown into the lion's den. However, contrary to the wishes of his enemies, he was delivered by an angel of the Lord. As we follow Daniel's predictions of end-time events around the activities of the Antichrist, we need to be aware of the possibility of history repeating itself. In other words, we need to allow the contemporary stories in the book of Daniel to give us insights into future events. When we examine each of the prophecies concerning this end-time enemy of Christ, we will clearly see a consistent reference to his exaltation above every god, including the God of heaven. The prophets Daniel, John, and Paul are in unison in their respective forecasts on the blasphemous activities of the Antichrist. While in the writings of the prophet Daniel, it is said that he shall speak great words against the Most High, exalt himself above every god, speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and have no regard for any god. In the writings of Paul, we are told that he exalted himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, and sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. All these references are in perfect harmony with what is written by John, saying, He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. As in the case of King Darius the Mede, the adoration of the man of sin will be given legislative support, where a death penalty is threatened against its violators. The central issue in end-time prophecy is worship. As end-time prophecy students, we cannot study the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation and not foresee the emergence of a new religious culture where our freedom to worship according to the dictates of our own consciences will be taken away. The day is coming when the privilege we often take for granted of worshipping the Most High on Sabbaths and on Sundays will become a thing of the past. Under these trying circumstances, the true Christians will be clearly distinguished from the false. When tremendous pressure from earthly powers begins to bear down on all Christians, it will be made manifest in the characters of each individual church member, whether they were serving the Lord from a true, sincere heart, or they were just playing church. The sharp contrast between the righteous and the wicked coming out of this religious crisis is eloquently spoken of by the prophet Malachi, saying, Then shall he return, and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not. Malachi 3 and verse 18. The prophecy of a new religious order in the last days is spoken of by as many as 14 Bible prophets, including Moses and the psalmist David. For a most intriguing prophecy study on this impending religious crisis, click on the link in the video or the link below and download the End Time Prophecy e-course package. I sincerely hope you have been blessed by this video. Thanks for watching.